Welcome, everyone. Really happy to have you here. I'm here with Or, co-founder and CEO of Flexor. He's going to introduce himself in a minute, and this is the Prepare Your Data Platform for Analytics Agents webinar. Quick intro. I'm Mayan. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Elementary. And here with me, all the way from the very, very cold Boston, right?
Yeah, I'm the CEO and one of the two co-founders of Flexor, but the company in just a bit, but we're primarily focused on bringing AI context from unstructured data. Before that, spent more than a decade in the data space, data for cyber defense, data for COVID during the pandemic, and heavily focused on unstructured data since the early days of modern AI, 2022.
Cool. We are gathered here today to talk about what it seems like everyone is talking about in data these days, analytics agents. What we share in common, Or and I, besides very similar taste in logos and in brand colors and in areas of interest, is that we work with a lot of teams that are actually deploying analytics agents in production already. And we have a lot of learnings from working with these teams. And this is something we wanted to share because we think this is where the industry is heading. And we hope you find these learnings valuable. So quickly, let's cover the agenda. We're going to do very quick intros of Elementary and Flexor, so you'll get to know our perspective and where we're coming from. We're going to talk about data at the AI era. We're going to share these lessons from the field, do a quick summary, and then we have time for live Q&A. So as Or mentioned in the start, if you have questions throughout the session, please feel free to write them in the Q&A section and we'll address them at the end of the session. A quick intro about Elementary to those of you who don't know us. We are providing trusted data for the AI era. So Elementary has both an open source and cloud platform solution, which is the data and AI control plane. Something very powerful about our solution is that we're code first. We have SDKs for dbt, we have SDKs for Python, and we enable teams around the world to detect data issues, alert only on what matters, and create this end-to-end observability and governance and invest in their building the right data foundations. And our entire offering is already powered by AI agents that are automating almost all of the workflows that make these tasks so difficult. Adding tests, triaging incidents, fixing issues, restreaming data, rerunning pipelines, everything we automate for you so you can concentrate on building data and building value for your organization.
Yeah. And Flexor, real quick, we're a data and AI infra company that is focused on creating the AI context engine for unstructured data. Because nowadays, when we want AI agents to make decisions on our behalf or take actions on our behalf, turns out that a lot of the content and information they need is locked in unstructured data sources, PDFs, emails, call transcripts, meeting notes, knowledge bases, online chats. And these data sources were not treated as data sources for many years because there's no need to. So Flexor helps data and AI teams unify them into consistent schemas, contextualize them, as in making sure that you connect the dots. Think about a contract in a PDF file that was amended 3 times. If you don't include these 3 amendments in the context of your AI engine, it's going to get irrelevant results. So we unify schemas, we contextualize data points, and provide high quality data for downstream applications. We live on top of data platforms and basically help data teams leverage the modern data stack with structured and unstructured data together.
Cool. Let's dive into some context and some background on what we're here, what we see around the industry. So something we feel very strongly from being in data for many years, and Or mentioned he has many years of background in data. I'm in data for over 15 years now. And what we feel is that in the analytics era, we barely scratched the surface. The ingestion was relatively limited because most of the data organizations have is unstructured. And in terms of consumption, we think dashboards are a pretty limited interface, and adoption of data for consumers was challenging. And I think everyone on this call would probably agree that getting true ROI from data was super, super challenging and is still a big challenge if we stick to traditional analytics tools. And one of the main reasons for that is that we were limited to human capacity. So human capacity in building data pipelines, human capacity in handling a lot of data, human capacity in consuming data and acting on it. And this limitation is being removed more and more every day as models evolve and as AI becomes more integrated into workflows. And this is already happening. So I don't know how many of you are feeling changes in your organizations, but across the industry, we work with organizations that are already like deep into this change or in phases of doing it or preparing for it. It's definitely where we're heading. We have some stats here from a recent survey that Anthropic did across 500 enterprises that they work with. 57 of them already went to production with AI agents last year, and 81% of them plan to tackle more complex use cases this year. So this year is definitely the year when it's happening. And the highest impact use case in the Anthropic survey was data analysis. 60% said this is the highest impact use case. And what we're expected to see is that the data consumption will change entirely. It's not humans anymore that consume data. Most of the data will be consumed by agents, and these agents will share it with other agents, and this will power different workflows, and things would start happening automatically based on the organizational data. And that, of course, raises a question that we encounter often. Do we even need a data platform anymore? Can't we just connect agents directly to all of the systems that we bring data from?
This is one of the biggest questions, right? All the people here on the call have invested probably around a decade in migrating into a central data platform. And we had our principles and philosophy behind it of why it matters. All of a sudden comes an engineer with a ChatGPT Enterprise, and they're like, why don't you just give me direct access to the source? All your data lineage, semantic layer, orchestration, observability. I don't need that anymore. The agent will figure this out for me. And I think that's what we both see working with many of these teams is that this dream of directly connecting an AI agent to the source doesn't really scale to the enterprise. It's really nice when you're working on personal productivity and also not always, but it just doesn't scale. And there are a few reasons. First one is misalignment, I think is a huge one. And misalignment has two perspectives to it. First one is that off-the-shelf agents don't understand the business. We thought for years about the semantic layer, right? Trying to make sure that different business units align on the numbers, like the conflicting decisions you see here on the right. Sales agent says 10 million in revenue, finance says 8.5. How do we calculate revenue? So you need to teach the agents how to understand the business. But also, when you have three different applications reporting on the same thing, if they don't agree on the database process and on the context of processing, they're clearly not going to agree on the outcomes.
Yeah, and I think something that we're not thinking about enough is that when people disagree on something, they have communication. We have a mechanism, right, how to handle that. And when agents don't agree on something, they will just operate, each with its own reality.
Yeah. And this is the other really important aspect of the problem is that we had semantic layer for structured data and structured metrics. What about a semantic layer for the business, right? Because we were both talking about, let's say, our implementation strategy. Do we agree on what implementation strategy means? And you're all working in big companies, you understand these discussions, two teams talking about the same thing, not agreeing on what's under the hood. So this is another thing that we need to align.
Yeah. And I think what makes this intuitive is that just think about all the reasons that led organizations to build a data platform in the first place. We did it because it made no sense to try to create this shared truth and understanding of the business based on every individual working with all the systems. We had to create a data model. We had to do a lot of work to get to that business truth. And agents will just require the same exact thing as humans in that aspect. So what we see is that the data platform is actually more important than ever. What we're seeing with the teams we're working with is more and more resources going to scaling the data platform to increase the amount of use cases it handles, because this is the foundation in which on top you'll build this entire AI agents initiative. And this is the main thing that is changing. And this is actually a term that Or coined. He told me we're going to see hyper growth on both sides. And I really related with it because that's exactly what we're seeing. We're seeing teams coming to us and telling us our plans, our roadmap for this year. We need to ingest a lot more data. The complexity will be bigger because we're going to need to handle real time. And the variety is much larger because suddenly we have all these new sources we need to consume. And we have unstructured data we need to handle. And we have much more consumptions because agents consume a lot more data than people. They don't rest. They don't need to go to the bathroom. They just take the data they need to work on it and do actions constantly. So everything is just growing really, really fast, and the requirements are getting really big. And
I want to maybe piggyback on that just for a moment. Another thing that we all tend to overlook is that agents are also producing huge amounts of data. They're communicating with each other. And the primary use case that we see is agent analytics. You have many agents running in production. You want to ensure that they're doing the tasks right, they're applying the guardrails, that you understand the usage patterns so you can improve them and gain more benefits. And they're creating tons of unstructured data that you need to ingest in order to understand what's happening inside. So they're consuming more, but they're also producing much more. And that's a compounding effect.
Yeah, it all sounds scary. We're here to share what we're seeing working for teams we meet. So how should you prepare your data platform for this expected hyper growth? Here are our learnings from teams we're working with. So we chose 4 main learnings to share with you, and we're gonna get deeper into each one of them. The first has to do a lot with structured and unstructured data, and luckily we have an expert here with us to share that. Then we're gonna elaborate on how investing in your data foundations is actually key to success. Then we're gonna talk about automation, because this hyper growth, you won't have probably hyper growth in personnel, right? You're not going to double your team or triple your team, but the requirements are doubling and tripling. So this is how you can actually achieve that. And then lastly, we're going to discuss an interesting idea we see some teams starting to do is they create dedicated AI pipelines. We'll share why. Over to you to talk about what from the field of structured and unstructured data.
Cool. I'll take the remote control. Is that the best timing?
Oh, what a
right?
cool new Zoom feature.
Yeah, it's a FYI, everyone. I think that Zoom is the only one that lets you take control, while Google Meet is the only one that lets you open a few laptops in the same room without the echo. So there's a battle of giants about which app to choose. Yeah, and I think that the biggest transformation in how we consume data for agents is that there's this dream of agents making autonomous decisions and taking autonomous actions. They clearly need the context, and a lot of this context is unstructured. For example, you're trying to resolve an insurance claim. You need the claim. Everybody's talking about the claim. But what about the policy that was behind the claim? What about the correspondences with the insured entity? What about the attachments? Huge amount of unstructured data. But also you need structured context, right? Because a lot of this information like product usage, premium information, risk data is all structured. The problem is that structured and unstructured data don't live on the same platforms. For many years, all the unstructured data use cases were just niche NLP, natural language processing use cases that lived in some Jupyter notebook of a data scientist. And this is not correct anymore. The thing is that all your structured data is within your data platform, and all your unstructured data lives nowhere, maybe a vector database, not in a unified place. So being able to bring them together and join structured and unstructured data became a very important task to let agents fulfill the dream. And the issue is that in reality, joining structured and unstructured data in most organizations that we talk with looks something like this: unstructured sources on the left side, AI applications, analytics applications on the right side, and we get the spaghetti architecture for data and AI context, meaning sources directly connected to destinations. It doesn't really matter if you're talking about tools that you build internally or products that your organization buys. And what happens here is that, just like we saw in the structured data space, there is no standard. That means that every application here does data preparation for itself, does context building for itself, and what you get at the end of the pipeline is inconsistency and loss of trust. For example, we have two apps here analyzing email data. This one is going to do it without the attachments because it's complex to analyze both emails and PDFs together. This one is going to do that with the attachments. They're clearly going to disagree on the context, so they'll produce different results, and your downstream stakeholders are going to ask, what happened here? And you won't be able to trace the answer because the developer of this tool just read it directly from an API and have zero lineage into the data. At the foundations of this spaghetti architecture, there are four core bad ideas. These are principles that we saw teams in the industry apply to prevent some of the negative design patterns that cause a lot of trouble. So I'll walk you through them real quick. Bad idea number one, approve an exhibit A of a contract without reading the entire contract. Clearly a bad idea. This is the recipe to get very bad legal chatbot decisions, right? We want AI agents to review legal contracts. We need to ensure that when you analyze a PDF, it has all the related legal information attached to it. And the solution to that is to do proper data preparation. And this is what a typical enterprise data set will look like. The first thing we need to do is to use AI to extract this unstructured data and start mapping what are the data points that we have in our data sets. The next thing will be to contextualize them, figure out which exhibit A connects to which contract, and make sure that when an AI agent reads them, it has the ability to access the full context. But reality is more complex than documents, right? Because documents tend to arrive as attachments to emails. And we have really interesting use cases. For example, when you send an invoice over email, and immediately after that, you get another email and saying, hey, please disregard this invoice because I got the amounts wrong. If you just ingested this data, loaded this invoice into your invoice store and give access to AI, the models will never have the information that this data point is irrelevant anymore. And what we see is low data quality causes downstream bad decisions. The last piece will be to do deduplication and remove unnecessary data elements from your data sets because they're creating bias in models.
Yeah, and I think something that, again, thinking about these use cases in a world where humans take action, then maybe this delay of this invoice is no longer relevant, isn't important, right? Because you just, like, someone will look at it at the end of the month. But when we're thinking about agents acting in real time, acting upon those invoices, then it becomes really critical. Data freshness gets a whole new level of importance.
Yeah, and we're working with one of the biggest banks in New York with the procurement department. And their problem is that they're paying invoices so quickly now that many times they just miss such information. And the process of getting the funds back and paying the right invoice is taking them so long, creates frustration and makes them lose money. So they're now very concerned with ensuring that they have the full context, right? This is the price of automation. But if you do it without the proper guardrails, you get really bad results. That idea number two is quite similar, but we're not talking about the single data point anymore. Imagine you AI generate an email to customer A while relying on customer B's sensitive information. Clearly a bad idea, also with information security downstream effects. And the solution to that is to be able to curate the data that is available for AI agents. Because if you ensure that irrelevant data is unavailable, models will not hallucinate it, they won't take unnecessary actions, and they won't come up with information that you don't want to share. So this is our data set again in the enterprise. When we run extraction, we see that it has many things. It has product manuals, it has our 2026 policies, it also has our 2017 policies, and it has a mix of customer B's and customer A's information. This is what we call formal knowledge, or what we know and what we want to teach every AI agent in the organization, right? This is how we operate. The problem is that there's also out of context knowledge. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's wrong. But sometimes you just want to exclude it from the data sets, right? We don't want the model to hallucinate things from the 2017 policy every 10 inquiries or every 100 inquiries, because that creates exposure and risk and bad results, and you lose trust. So being able to classify these data points and exclude them from the model becomes really important. But another thing, we're talking about AI autonomy, is this blob here we call passive knowledge. This is all the things that humans in the organization know, the information they record, the context they collect. It's on your Slack channels, Confluence, meeting notes, or recordings. And if you want AI to operate independently, you need to make sure that you get formal and passive knowledge in, and you extract out of context knowledge out. So the solution to that, make sure that you ingest the right data and build pipelines to eliminate data points that shouldn't be there. Don't rely on AI to figure this out.
Data governance is required on steroids now.
Yeah. And it's a bit more complex because traditionally we knew that we have a table that some people should access, some don't. Now we have a bunch of emails. Some of them contain employee information. Some of them contain sensitive business information. Some of them are just unnecessary. And if you process them, you pay the extra cost. So that's, data governance for unstructured data. Better idea number 3 is about combining these pieces to make sure that you have a closed loop around the performance of models. Imagine you consistently send sales and finance reports that disagree on the numbers, right? It's clearly a bad idea, very familiar from the structured data space, nothing new here. The solution to that is to ensure that the context that is being provided to these systems is consistent. So when you get the numbers, when you compare structured numbers, you know where they came from. So here's a very common use case. With unstructured data and AI agents, you have financial reports. You want to extract the figures because you want to have them organized in a table, because that's the most reasonable way to work with the financials, with numbers. You don't want to do that with AI. You want to do that with SQL or in a spreadsheet. And now we have AI agent number 1 processing that, saying the Q1 2020 sales were $9,770. AI agent number 2 says it was $9,770,000,000 US dollars. And when you look at the data, you see a table. And this table says that net sales is 9,770. Every OCR model in the market will probably compute this information correctly. What around 70% of them miss is that this number is in millions. And this is why context matters and why consistency matters. Because when you look at the enterprise scale, you're surely going to have more than one application consuming this data. So when you have 3 applications, 2 of them say it's 9 billion and 1 of them says it's 9,000, you need a human in the loop to figure this out. If you ensure that numbers come with context, AI models are smart enough to figure out the relation and make sure they provide reliable answers.
Cool. Or you shared some really interesting challenges on how to actually be able to work with unstructured data and maintain its quality. But as we said, we strongly believe that structured and unstructured data need to be joined together, and we would need both of them to be able to power the workflows we want to power, and that's what we see across the organizations we work with. I think even one of the reasons that we see so many use cases now of unstructured data is what we talked about before, of you remove the human capacity limits. We can't really handle processing information from so many different documents, but agents can, and this unlocks a really great potential. And this is the amplification point, right? So AI agents, they amplify the potential. They really amplify what we can do, but they also amplify the problems. And this is where investing in good data foundations really comes to place. So you talked about data quality issues, data governance issues, data discovery issues, the same ones we know already existing in our current data platform. Everything gets amplified when you make things more complicated, and everything gets amplified when so much more is happening with each data set and so much faster. So instead of getting a wrong report, you get 100 wrong decisions that were already made by agents. They already acted, they already did something based on this wrong information that they saw somewhere. If there are discovery gaps, humans will keep searching for answers. They're gonna reach out to each other. They're gonna ask for help. Agents hallucinate because they want us to be happy. So they would just hallucinate the gaps and provide wrong answers. And when we're talking about governance risk, if you have governance hole, you have compliance risk. If you have governance holes and you give agents access to act upon that data, you're going to have privacy violations. It's not going to be a risk anymore. And this is something we see as teams scale. One of the most expensive mistakes they make is that they scale and scale and they don't invest in strong data foundations. And by the way, a lot of the conversations we're having with customers these days is them explaining internally in the organization that data quality, data governance, investing in all of that isn't convenience anymore, right? It's a must. It's the only way that will enable them to handle the requirements of these AI initiatives.
It reminds me of something. Many times we used to talk about data lineage as a way to trace data quality issues and identifies that something is going to break before it breaks. And right now it breaks so quickly. So it's how quickly can we fix it becomes the most relevant question. And when you don't have a central place to control these pipelines, somebody has to go and fix that somewhere across this spaghetti architecture. And that's a big concern for CIOs. Like when they see that, they realize.
And of course, there is the question of what are good data foundation, what are good data foundations for AI. So everyone on the call, this is the time to take a screenshot, but we won't dive very deep into that. I want to refer you to the Elementary 2.0 webinar we did a few weeks ago where we covered this in depth. And also you can go to our blog and see a whole blog post about all of these principles, but basically investing in availability of data, in making data discoverable, in naming convention, in well-defined schemas and relationships, in data quality, in freshness, in governance and tagging things and documenting things. This is what makes AI successful in a data environment. And I think that the best analogy that I like to use that I heard from one of our customers is if we're going to hire a new analyst tomorrow and we're just going to give it access to everything, would it be able to produce meaningful insights? How fast would it be able to produce meaningful insights? And if the answer is this analyst will get lost, it will need tons of training, tons of guidance, it will have tons of questions to the teammates that are already familiar with the environment, then we're not AI ready, because that's actually what we want to achieve, right? We want to be able to get all these virtual analysts, to get these agents and to tell them, here is the environment, good luck. And we actually want them to operate around it. They might be smarter than the average human, but they also have their limits. And we need to accept that, and we need to make sure our environment is ready. And these foundations will not just serve AI, they're going to serve you as well, because it's going to accelerate the entire data organization. And this all sounds very scary, right? We're talking about hyperscale, we're talking about foundations. You're like, I'm not even able to actually achieve all that in my current environment. How am I supposed to achieve that at such scale and the volume we're talking about? And there's a saying we like to say here in Elementary that scaling data product for the scale that AI requires is not humanly possible. It shouldn't be on you. You can't manually keep working the same way you've been working until now and be expected to scale so much. And of course, there's always the option of hiring and increasing the team size, but that's not actually possible. Like your organization wants to move fast, want to deliver results, you need to find a different way. And what we strongly believe is that you need AI to build the data foundations that AI agents need. So a few examples I can give you from teams we've been working with. A lot of them are already adopting fully coding tools like Claude Code or Cursor, and that's how they do with agents most of the building of their data pipelines. We at Elementary offer AI agents that fix issues, triage incidents, add tests, add governance, do all that for you in your code, collaborate with engineers on the team. You at Flexor, right? You're using AI in order to extract the context and structure all this unstructured data. It's not like you're manually writing the code to do it or defining every use case statistically in code. You're using AI to do it. It opens a lot of possibilities for us. AI will impact both sides. It impacts the way you work and the inputs and how you handle your data just as much as it will impact the way your data is consumed.
And I can give you two quick examples from the unstructured data space that are related to that. So what's a manual effort that companies actually do and what it should look like. So we're working with a SaaS company like B2B selling software, and they're trying to train AI agents to resolve complex support issues. So what they decided to do is to collect tacit knowledge that support tickets, but also call recordings. And what they decided is that they want to make sure that they don't include commercial discussion recordings, and that you have gone on the call and it records all your team's external communications. They don't want to have any commercial information leakage, and they want to have complex support issues. So what they technically do is to manually tag conversations. They listen to conversations, they search for keywords and try to identify pieces of information that they can load to the agent and context. And they have this routine where they update that every now and then, which is insane because when you think about the tens of thousands of calls that they're recording each month, it's not humanly possible to validate them. And when there's a new product feature, how do you ensure that new debug information gets to the agents? So what we help them do is build pipelines that filter out these data points based on the context, just identifying the parts of the call that has sensitive commercial information. Or a company that gets news pieces and marketing email ingested through their email analysis pipelines. And what happens is that their models are hallucinating business knowledge based on marketing materials of other companies. That's like the basics of data quality, and there's so much of it. It's 60% of their inboxes. So it has huge impacts on the downstream applications.
Yeah, so I think it's just a matter of changing the mindset and thinking every time you think about, oh, how are we going to handle that? It's going to take forever. We need to change our mindset and we need to understand that we're probably addressing the problem wrong and we need to implement it with AI and harvest its power. And then lastly, a pattern we see starting to emerge is actually companies building data pipelines that are purpose-built for a specific AI application or AI agent or AI use case. And we actually see three strong incentives to do that. So it's not something across the board yet. A lot of our customers are using their already operating pipelines and model data for AI, but some of them are starting to branch out and build dedicated pipelines. And there are three reasons for that. So the first is performance. When you give really large inputs to an LLM, it creates very slow response and it's expensive, right? Yeah, it's just a big spend. I know this founder that they are a very lean company now. They're like just 4 or 5 people, I think, and they just raised $6 million. And I'm like, are you going to hire more people now? And he's, no, I need that to pay my Anthropic bills. We're already spending so much on tokens because everything is automated with agents. These optimizations and limiting tokens usage, when you work with AI at scale, it starts to become really significant. Then the second incentive is reliability. If you limit the focus, you reduce hallucinations and you get more reliable results. Or you gave some really good examples of you can give an agent irrelevant data and you're gonna really mess up your results. And then lastly, it's governance. This is how you control which data can actually be used for each purpose. And you're not giving them too much freedom. You're saying this is the extent of data that you should be exposed to, and you can't have access to anything else.
So I think the examples here are so straightforward that it drives me nuts that companies don't pay attention to that because it's all skunk works right now. They're building smaller things. There was a question in the chat about the ROI. We can talk about it later. But the thing from governance perspective, when you have this direct connection between an app and the source, you give the AI agent the guidelines not process any email with employee information.
Yeah.
What are the odds that it's going to follow these guidelines 100% of the time? The answer is zero. And that creates exposure. And the question is, do you really want to configure each of these apps? Some of them don't let you do that. Configure them to exclude this information. The best way to do that is to build AI pipelines, turning the huge data set of emails or contracts into a view that just selects the data points where sensitive business information equals false because you created a pipeline that controls that, or it joins it with structured data. And if that's your sensitive enterprise accounts, make sure to exclude their information from the chatbot because you don't want to take the risk. So think about it as consuming the data from a well-curated data set instead of doing that from the raw data.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's a matter of deciding what's the right way to implement for your needs. So there are things that LLMs excel at. They don't excel at understanding exactly what they need. SQL is great at implementing that, right? At filtering, creating a curated data set. So this is a way to mix both worlds and leverage the strengths of each of the technologies. Cool. We're approaching the end of the webinar. Let's summarize. These are the trends we're seeing. This is where the data platform is heading. So, as we said, the AI moment is now. AI agents that leverage data will become the standards. And a future we can picture is agents that you can think about as workforce. They have different roles in the organizations. They're customer support, they're marketers, they're product managers, and they actually do work. And the way they all speak the same language and understand the business is the underlying data model. And that would mean that the data stack will actually evolve to be the data and AI stack, as AI agents would become the primary data consumers. And this introduced a whole new set of requirements. And this is point number 3. It's the hyper growth, right? New challenges of scale, performance, complexity, unstructured, structured data, real-time data, a lot more volume, both in the ingestion and the consumption. And the only way to actually make all of this a reality is to automate more and more data engineering workflows with AI. So the role of data engineers will change. And this is how data teams will achieve the scale AI requires. They will become more supervisors and curators and planners of the stack, while AI agents will be there to actually implement and do all the work that it's just not humanly possible to do manually at this scale. And the reason we decided to do this webinar now is that we strongly believe that organizations are moving in this direction. They're becoming more productive. They can do so much more. And this is the time to enable that. And this is the time for data teams to shine and to invest in foundations and to enable their organizations. One of our customers, a VP data at a large bank, told us, I'm not going to be the blocker of AI in my organization. I'm going to be the enabler. I want to have the best infrastructure possible to make this a reality. And this is the difference, right, between being successful and failing in your AI initiatives moving forward.
Yeah, and we have this saying at Flexor that's just like the Maslow's pyramid for data practitioners. First thing that you don't want to be yelled at. The second thing is that like, data people just want to be loved, right? It's like, first of all, they don't yell at you, then they see you as an enabler. And the fifth one is that there's an opportunity to become the heroes of the story. For many years, it was just providing the data for somebody else to do the job. And now, like the job is so data and AI based that the dream of providing the right insights, the dream of optimizing a line of business by yourself is becoming the reality. You start with not messing up the data. You then move to being a trusted advisor and an enabler for other initiatives. And then you can take initiative and actually achieve things independently. It wasn't even nearly possible 5 years ago.
Wow, I love that. I'm going to steal that.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome.
Cool. So in that note, we're going to move to Q&A. So let me quickly pull up the questions. Cool. Okay, so the first question is, what's the most expensive mistake you've seen a team make when deploying an analytics agent?
Do you want to take that? I have an example too.
Yeah, I think what I said before, about what happens if you introduce a new human analyst to the team now. How do you handle that? If you didn't unlock that, then you're just going to invest in AI agents. And we saw organizations that are like, we invested so much in our evals infra and we pay so much for the most expensive models and we still get shitty results. Then what would you expect? So this is, I think, a very expensive mistake. It's like, or my co-founder calls it putting a lipstick on a pig. You keep improving, trying to improve the outlook of it, but you're not actually investing in what's making an impact in the foundations.
Yeah, my story is very similar. It's a team engineering side, not data side, that decided to build a pipeline that processes emails to identify urgent issues, urgent production issues by customers because they want to react quickly. And after a month, they realized that they spent just shy of $2,500 a day on this pipeline because the engineer who built that on top of N8N, great tool, but queried the email client directly, pulled out all the emails instead of ingesting it at once and building an incremental pipeline, ingested all of the mailbox over and over again, and just ran all these tokens every single time through the entire pipeline. This is why data prep matters. You do it once, you spend the cost once, and you end up paying $2,500 total and not daily. They stopped the pipeline eventually and decided to hold the project because they weren't ready to make the investment. So that's a bummer.
Yeah, very expensive. Cool. We have a question of how do you enable agents to take decisions autonomously, making sure they actually follow company guidelines? Where is the connection between business rule and ingested source data in vector spaces?
Can I take this one?
Yeah, of course.
I have something to say about vectors. I think that the answer to this question is that when you work purely with vectors, there is no effective way to control the access and the connection between business rules and the data you ingest. And the reason why is that vector databases live in a somewhat separate universe. We'll purely focus on unstructured data. If you want to add structured aspects of it that are super important when you try to control what information flows, you need to add it as data point level metadata. And you can just join it and filter using SQL. And that creates a big issue. I think that trying to reinvent the data stack for unstructured data proved to be not the best architecture. But putting the vectors thing aside, making sure that they follow company guidelines starts with ensuring that the guidelines that they see are the most recent ones. Think about that example, making sure that the data set containing recent company policies is based on documents flowing in, being analyzed to extract the effective date, expiry date terms, and whenever a new document comes in, make sure to retire the old one. So you start with that. That's the first piece. The second piece is that at the AI agent level, make sure to enforce the rules. This is like a completely different topic, like a huge topic. But the third thing will be to put a monitoring piece in the middle to make sure that you get to see the outputs either in line or after the fact, analyze them, and apply business rules to ensure that the behavior is consistent with what we're aiming to see, like visibility and monitoring in a way.
Yeah. So we should monitor both the inputs and the outputs.
Exactly.
And then we have another question of how is modeling for AI different from traditional data modeling, like in existing BI programs? Cool. So I think from what we see in traditional data modeling, you could handle some ambiguity. It means that you could have good enough data model that data analysts could work around with a lot of context that they have in their head, which is very hard to map, right? And very hard to notice. And there is actually this video I really like. It should explain to you how to give proper instructions. We actually show it to developers on how to write good documentation of like it's this father asking for his kids to explain to him how to make a peanut butter jelly sandwich. So they're like, just take the peanut butter and take the jelly and put it in the bread. And he just takes them and put in the bread. And there are like many iterations that they try until they explain to him exactly. Take one piece of bread from the and take it and put it on the plate, and then take a knife and then open the jelly jar, like exactly step by step what to do. So I think this is a really good analogy to data modeling for human data analysts and data modeling for agents. You need to be so much more explicit with your naming conventions, with your documentation, with the relations between different tables. They can't handle any ambiguity. If you have different data sets, different columns that are named similarly, and the columns aren't well defined, it won't understand on its own what to do with each. You need to be very explicit. So I think that's the biggest difference I see in data modeling.
100%. And the thing that is changing all the time is that models are becoming better at not doing ridiculous things without getting guidance. However, just like your best engineers on the teams and the best product managers and like everyone in the company, even the most brilliant people, when you don't provide them with the right information or telling them exactly what you want them to achieve, this is where they make mistakes. So in that context, Opus 4.6 by Anthropic is an amazing model. However, if you don't make sure that it sees the right data points and knows that this table is staging and this table is production, so it shouldn't mix between them, it's going to make a mistake. It happens on my team. Brilliant researchers just look at the wrong data set and come up with the wrong conclusions. So how can you expect AI to solve that if you don't throw it in the map?
I can relate. Oh, there's a question for me. Mayan, how do you think about quality for unstructured data? It's not like you can run a freshness test on a PDF. That's a very good question. So first, I do think that there are the same data quality dimensions or data quality pillars that we know from structured data do apply. So freshness and completeness and accuracy, they definitely apply. So if I think maybe even about the examples you gave, or so completeness of unstructured data means if a contract is mentioning the appendices, we need to make sure we have them as well, right? As part of the same data set. That's completeness. When we talk about accuracy, let's make sure if this is a data pipeline of emails, that all the values are actually emails and that we didn't get something in between that isn't actually an email, right? We actually have elementary a test of a LLM as a judge where you can say, I expect every value in this data set to be a contract. A contract has a date, has a head. You can describe exactly what you expect and we'll validate each value. This is like a quality test for unstructured data. But then again, freshness and things like that, I think the best way to approach it is to extract context from the unstructured pipeline, treat it as its own metadata, and run validations on that metadata, just like we do with structured data.
It's spot on. And I think that these are brilliant examples, making sure that Exhibit A actually exists in the data sets. Otherwise, it's a data quality issue. On top of that, you know that when you get emails, each email contains the entire thread underneath it, which is the context. What happened if somebody mistakenly deleted that? Do you want to work on an email thread when you have a single email as part of a 50 email long conversation? So the answer is typically no. But if you could merge it to another email where the conversation wasn't deleted, you can enhance context quality back. And this is where AI fits in. It's not humanly possible, but it's definitely possible for AI to scan an entire data set and connect the dots for you.
Cool. Or there's another question here for you. When teams come to you and say, we just want to connect ChatGPT to our data warehouse, what do you tell them? What's the biggest kind of way to attack that? If someone here as an executive or something that is aiming to do that.
Well, I think that, first of all, that's an excellent answer because it depends on what they're trying to do. But what they do is that I'll let them do that as a pilot. And then I'll show them three aspects. First one is how it gets misleading context. Like I have my own email processing ecosystem that I'm using for my personal productivity. And before I started consuming the data that was well prepared right now by our platform, but you can do that your own, I just got really bad answers about missing follow-ups and such. So give it a try. Push them to try that on not only a single email use case, push them to try that on complex use cases. Second one is show them the cost of reprocessing. Imagine that situation with the team paying $2,300
A
on daily
day.
processing. So show the costs, for example, and then ask them, and what if you gave this ability to everyone on your team? And then basically giving them a few examples that are very hard to resist. You can show a few of the snapshots of the example. They can try it on their own and just see that it doesn't really work with all data press.
Yeah.
But the best way is to let them fail first on a small scale.
Cool. And on that note, I think we're getting to the end of our hour. Or it was a real pleasure. And thank you everyone for joining us. If you want to learn more, feel free to reach out to us. You have our emails here, and also on the websites of both companies, you can book a call, book a demo. We are small startups, so you're probably going to meet us on the other side of the call. Looking forward to discuss your particular use cases and diving deeper into your roadmap and what you're trying to achieve this year. And thank you so much for joining, and stay tuned for our next webinars as well.
It was a pleasure, Mayan. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a
Bye.
great rest of your day. Goodbye.